Thanks so much for joining us here on the CBN News Channel. I'm Ephraim Graham.
And I'm Charlene Israel. The state of Arizona is mourning the loss of 19 elite firefighters. They died Sunday battling a wildfire near Prescott. It is the greatest loss of firefighters in this country since 9/11. Heather Sells has more.
The firefighters were battling 6,000 acres of blazing brush northwest of Phoenix. Fed by gusty winds and triple-digit heat, the flames exploded out of control.
We're devastated. We just lost 19 of some of the finest people you'll ever meet. I mean, right now we're in crisis.
19 of the 20-member crew of the Granite Mountain Hotshots died, with the lone survivor in a separate location. Across the country, 110 hotshot crews are trained to hike into the wilderness and build lines of protection between people and fires. In this case, officials say the fast-moving blaze encircled the team, forcing all 19 to deploy fire-resistant shelters like this one.
When you have that much fuel and that dry conditions and those kind of wind conditions, it can become extremely unpredictable.
This fire was very radical in its behavior. That's what caused the deaths. It was the change in the radical behavior of the burning fuels. They were just caught up in a very bad situation.
In a statement, the governor noted it may be days or longer before an investigation reveals how this tragedy occurred. But the essence we already know in our hearts: fighting fires is dangerous work. The Arizona tragedy is the largest loss of firefighters battling a wildfire in 80 years. It's still blazing out of control in Yarnell, 80 miles northwest of Phoenix. It has consumed half the structures in town. Most people have evacuated. Heather Sells, CBN News.
Much of the Southwest continues to broil under sweltering heat wave. An elderly man in Las Vegas was found dead in a home without air conditioning, and nearly 140 people have been hospitalized after falling victim to the brutal heat. Sizzling temperatures are spread from Boise, Idaho, all the way to Houston, Texas, where it reached 107 degrees. Death Valley, known as the hottest place on Earth, hit 128 degrees over the weekend. Las Vegas was a sweltering 117 degrees. At least a dozen runners passed out from the heat wave during a half marathon in Pasadena. The hot temperatures are expected to last through the July 4th holiday.
Turning overseas, 1 year after Egyptians elected President Mohamed Morsi, millions took to the streets this weekend to demand that he leave office. Today, the nationwide protests continue, with some even ransacking Morsi's Muslim Brotherhood headquarters. At least 16 people have been killed across Egypt in pockets of violence, and some say the stage is now set for a potential civil war. Chris Mitchell has more from Jerusalem.
Egyptians flooded their major cities with demands that Morsi step down.
I'm demanding that he step down from office and leave. I'm demanding the whole Muslim Brotherhood, to leave the country. We don't want them here.
Many Egyptians believe Morsi has put the agenda of the Muslim Brotherhood ahead of the country.
He just wants the Brotherhood to rule Egypt. He doesn't look after the Egyptian at all. We don't need him. We don't want him. He should leave.
The anti-Morsi fervor brought together secular Egyptians, moderate Muslims, and Christians. Meanwhile, smaller groups of pro-Morsi demonstrators also took to the streets.
The people hold the legitimacy, and we support Dr. Mohamed Morsi, and we would like to tell him not to be affected by the opponent's protests and not to give up his rights. We are here to support and protect him.
Morsi says he won't step down. His spokesman said he wants to talk with his opponents.
The president has called for dialogue. The president has previously said that he is reaching out to everyone and that he's ready to listen to serious national dialogue.
Yet Morsi opponents say he has pushed through unpopular constitutional amendments, assumed unprecedented powers, and failed to address Egypt's sinking economy. Magdi Halil from Coptic Solidarity told CBN's Christian World News that under Morsi, Christians have suffered increased persecution. He warns of a potential civil war.
It's a matter of time that Egypt will go to a civil war because Muslim Brotherhood and other Islamists only believe in power and violence. So they don't keep silent. They don't believe in peaceful demonstrations.
Egypt's army is watching the country's growing divide and have implied they might intervene. In the meantime, Egypt's future seems to hang in the balance. Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
U.S. Senators John McCain and Lindsey Graham are calling for the U.S. to take action to stop Iran's nuclear program. At a news conference in Jerusalem, they said a nuclear Iran is the greatest possible Mideast danger, and they believe the American people would support a U.S. military strike to stop Iran from getting nuclear weapons.
Most Americans believe they would use it if they got it. Most Americans believe that they're serious about destroying the state of Israel. Most Americans believe that radical Islam is a threat to the American way of life. So I think this case can be made. It just has to be made. We're war-weary, but we're not tired of being free.
Both McCain and Graham say Iran's recent election of a new president will not change Iran's nuclear ambitions.
European leaders are furious over new allegations that U.S. spy agencies monitored European Union diplomatic offices in Washington, New York, and Brussels. It is the latest in a string of revelations dropped by NSA leaker Edward Snowden. A report in Der Spiegel says the USA monitored EU phone conversations and gained access to a computer network containing internal emails and documents. European leaders are threatening economic sanctions and investigations. The EU Justice Commission says partners do not spy on each other.
Backers of California's Proposition 8 scrambled to stop same-sex weddings this weekend. That came after the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals gave the go-ahead to issue marriage licenses. The court ignored a mandated 28-day waiting period, opening the floodgate for gay marriages to begin. Saturday, Prop 8 sponsors filed an emergency motion asking the U.S. Supreme Court to step in and stop the weddings while they consider their next move.
We haven't even had our opportunity to see what other options are available to us to uphold the will of the people with Prop 8, but the Ninth Circuit has jumped the gun and forced same-sex marriage back on California. And I think the main issue is that we do not have an appellate court in California or anywhere that has ruled Proposition 8 to be unconstitutional. And so how is it that we can go forward with redefining marriage simply because one trial judge said so?
Sunday, Supreme Court Justice Anthony Kennedy denied the emergency motion.
The president of the Family Research Council predicts that many Americans who are tolerant of same-sex marriage will be shocked to see how it cuts back on religious freedom. Tony Perkins says Christian business owners will increasingly face prosecution if they won't take part in gay weddings. And he says parents may soon find their children's public schools promote the acceptance of same-sex marriage. Perkins appeared on CBS's Face the Nation.
The IRS targeting of conservative groups back in the headlines now. House lawmakers recently fought about the IRS official at the heart of the scandal. They voted to bring Lois Lerner back, saying she violated her right to remain silent. John Waggy has more.
Democrats on the committee say they're concerned about violating IRS official Lois Lerner's Fifth Amendment right not to incriminate herself.
I think all of us, both sides of the aisle, want to hear what Ms. Lerner has to say. And what information she may bring. We all want to do our job and get on with the investigation that underlies all of this. But I think we all hopefully are just as concerned about making sure that this committee upholds the Constitution.
But Republicans claim she waived that right when she declared her innocence in a hearing in May, and that the biggest issue facing the committee shouldn't be obscured.
We are not here with regard to Lois Lerner. We are here because there were American citizens who were affected by the agency that she oversaw, who used their authority in the IRS to what we believe to be an oppressive fashion against what could be their constitutional rights and potentially in a criminal fashion.
National polls show 3 out of 4 Americans believe the IRS should be investigated for targeting political groups, especially after the agency admitted it went after religious groups and the Tea Party under Lerner's watch.
In fact, she may well have been a bad person for a few decades now.
At a recent event held by the Competitive Enterprise Institute, Senator Rand Paul pointed out Lerner has a long history of targeting conservatives as a bureaucrat.
Turns out she was in the FEC 10 years ago telling a Republican candidate that if he would just renounce the idea of running for office, he would promise never to run for office again, she'd drop the charges. He spent $100,000 defending himself.
The clerk will call the roll.
Democrats on the Judiciary Committee may be able to provide some protection for Lerner and other government officials, but the widespread IRS harassment of citizens for their political views is bound to be a hot subject in many more hearings on Capitol Hill. John Waggy, CBN News.
Tax deductions for charitable giving may be on the chopping block. Top Senate Finance Committee members Max Baucus and Orrin Hatch are proposing a, quote, blank slate approach to tax reform. It would wipe the tax code clean and start over. Evangelical Council for Financial Accountability President Dan Busby says he's concerned about the proposal. He says the deduction is an effective way to encourage individual giving. There is a link on our website, cbnnews.com, where you can find a complete list of provisions that could be cut.
Lawmakers in Texas are back for the second round of a political battle over a proposed measure regulating abortion. The latest session comes less than a week after a Democratic filibuster and hundreds of angry protesters threw the end of the first special session into chaos. The Republican majority has promised to pass the wide-ranging abortion bill this time around, even as opponents mobilize for more protest. Democrat Senator Wendy Davis led the opposition with a 12-hour filibuster. Texas Governor Rick Perry says Republicans need to match the intensity of the protesters, but with grace and civility.
Coming up, the trials of being a Christian in Tanzania, how churches are under attack from a growing Islamist threat. A Syrian Catholic priest was beheaded last weekend by jihadist firefighters in northern Syria. Video posted online by Live Leak shows the execution as dozens of men and boys cheering Allahu Akbar, or God is great. Catholic Online reports Father Francois Mourad had been accused of collaborating with President Bashar al-Assad's regime. The accusations have not been confirmed. The publication also warns of the threat that the spread of militant Islam represents to Christians around the world. Human rights leaders recently told Congress that Syrian Christians fear the Obama administration's decision to arm Syrian rebel groups could lead to an Islamic state.
President Obama is wrapping up his Africa tour with a visit to Tanzania today. He's meeting with Tanzania's president and attending a roundtable discussion with business leaders. But as CBN's Gary Lane reports, Tanzanian Christians are hoping he'll also take a stand against increased acts of persecution against them.
The allure of beautiful beaches and tranquil ocean waters draw 100,000 tourists to the island of Zanzibar each year. Visitors and their money are welcome to the Tanzanian paradise. But this East African island, influenced by Islamic extremism, has a dark past and a troubling present.
This is a slave memorial here in Zanzibar. Several hundred years ago, when Arab traders first came to this island, they were quick to enslave the local population. Fast forward to 2013, there are no longer slaves here, but today Christians are suffering.
Churches have been attacked and Christian leaders threatened. Last February, a Catholic priest was killed outside this church.
I had a crowd of people chanting Allahu Akbar, Takbir, destroy this church of, infidel.
In May 2012, Bishop Dixon Kaganga helped church members flee a Saturday evening prayer meeting as an angry mob approached. He remained behind in a church office.
They were saying that, this pastor, all the Saturday he used to come here. Maybe he's here. Look after him, where he is, They were saying we don't want this church here. We don't want Christianity in Zanzibar.
The Muslim extremists never found Bishop Dixon, but they destroyed his car and set fire to chairs and church equipment inside the building.
They opposed the church. They opposed the message of Christ. When you preach Christ and Jesus is doing signs and wonders, and Muslims are convinced, to become to Christianity. So they want to attack this. They don't want this,
And it's not only happening in Zanzibar. Church attacks have also spread to the Tanzanian mainland, like this one that killed 3 people and injured at least a dozen others in the town of Arusha last May. Author Raymond Ibrahim says extremists are now waging jihad in African countries that have a high percentage of Christians.
It's resurgent Islamic mentality, which is it's everywhere. And now in Tanzania, of course, which earlier you never thought of as being a radical nation.
Church leaders say attacks and threats have actually strengthened the Tanzanian body of Christ. As for Bishop Dixon's church, services resumed after repairs were made. He encourages Zanzibarian Christians to remain focused on God.
He is faithful on us, that we will endure and we will pass through this and we will become victorious. And many good things are happening. And I don't want people to cry, let's rejoice.
Gary Lane, CBN News, Zanzibar.
Up next, children who are being sold and traded for sex in broad daylight. The battle to beat child sex trafficking in Brazil. Protesters have been clashing with police in Brazil the past few weeks. They're angry about the millions spent in World Cup preparations, saying that money should be spent on social programs instead.
Brazil will be hosting the World Cup in 2014. Countries that host the big gaming events look forward to the money and the tourists they bring. But there is a tragic side as well, the sexual exploitation of children. Our Heather Sells has more.
In recent years, growing numbers of tourists have flocked to northeastern Brazil. Here, they take advantage of the region's beautiful beaches, its colonial architecture, and tragically, its children.
It's very easy to buy a girl. It's like buying chocolate.
CBN News traveled to northeast Brazil for a closer look at the area's child sex trafficking epidemic. Youth counselor Carlos de Bomba describes it as out of control. Taxi drivers, hotel workers, and drug dealers form an underground network connecting supply and demand. And every week, De Bomba's agency receives 5 to 6 new victims in need of help. After our interview, we walked to the beach across from our hotel, and De Bomba noticed children for sale right in front of us. Our translator approached a young boy working as a transvestite. He agreed to tell us how the system works.
They come in the car, they ask how much it is. I tell them and they say if they want me, and if they want me, they take me.
Leah uses the $25 to $50 per trick to buy clothes and food for himself and his mom. He told us he started at age 14. His life of pain was clear.
I don't like it. I hate it. I just do it because I need it.
Brazil may soon overtake Thailand as the #1 country in trafficked children. The United Nations estimates that more than 250,000 are sexually exploited here. Much of it happens in the Northeast region, where child sex tourists arrive from Europe and the U.S.
We see kids start at age 12, 13. It's a way for them to have an income, to receive money easily.
And as if the problem of child sex trafficking wasn't bad enough, the worst may be yet to come. Many here fear the World Cup games, to be held in the stadium being built behind me, will bring a flood of tourists eager not just for sports, but for children.
We are trying to find a way to avoid this.
Egivaldo Tavares works in child services in the metro area of Recife. His research suggests kids here are in danger.
What we see before and after the World Cup is trauma in the communities.
Most who work with youth here believe more tourism means more child exploitation. So public officials and nonprofits are teaming up to raise awareness and try to prevent a potential region-wide disaster.
The social workers are very concerned about it, so they are working in prevention now with educational materials in the city and also giving workshops in the schools.
Many in this region also recognize that a long-term strategy is essential to wipe out a tragedy that's deeply embedded in the culture. Poor children here typically grow up in small, crowded homes where they see sexuality that should be private and often face abuse themselves.
They start early to see sex in a distorted way, so it's easier to start in this kind of life.
Drug dealers also take advantage of kids addicted to crack and other illegal substances. It's also common for desperately poor parents to encourage their children to sell themselves.
The moms, sometimes they put their children in this situation because they need help.
In the case of Sophia, a 15-year-old we met, her parents simply looked the other way. Sophia says she stopped because she wants a better life.
I realized it's not good. You can get pregnant and be unable to go on with your studies and get a good job.
The U.S.-based ministry Compassion International is in the sex trafficking fight for the long haul. Compassion uses child sponsorships to fund ministry centers across the country.
We are not only providing a place for them to come to avoid the streets, but we are concerned about giving them an education in a holistic way so they can have a different opportunity than their parents.
Compassion partners with local churches to take care of children's physical needs, and it emphasizes academics, including a special curriculum that targets sexual abuse. Compassion's approach also emphasizes decision-making for a lifetime. It's a tough concept for so many children whose families desperately need help now. But prevention via one-child sponsorships may be the most effective strategy. In a recent survey, economists rated it #1 in the long-term fight against poverty.
I believe the best way to combat exploitation is the prevention we're doing in partnership with Compassion.
And for that reason, Tuares has become a regular at this project, building relationships with kids in the hopes of helping them to realize their dreams. For these children, it's not too late. And it may not be too late for Leah. After our interview, we prayed for him and for his dreams.
I would like to get married with someone I'm in love with and quit doing what I do.
Leah told us he'd like to become a nurse. A true miracle, perhaps, that one child in so much pain would dream of helping others. Reporting in Recife, Brazil, Heather Sells, CBN News.
Operation Blessing continues to work with residents in Moore, Oklahoma, affected by that huge tornado back in May. Recently, OB learned of a family of 9 that was in an emergency situation. Portions of their roof was damaged during the storm, leaving the interior of their home exposed to the elements. Some of the ceiling collapsed into their home, leaving their only working bathroom barely functional and unsafe. Operation Blessing jumped into immediate action, replacing the entire roof, repairing the collapsed ceiling, and putting fresh paint up on the walls.
Operation Blessing is a blessing.
Hard at work.
I
Indeed,
love it.
they always are.
Amen. Well, that's going to do it now for the CBN News Channel. You can find more of our exclusive coverage of the issues you care most about at cbnnews.com.
And tell us what you think about the stories you've seen here today. You can do that on Facebook or at CBN News on Twitter. Hope you'll join us again right here next time. Have a marvelous Monday, everybody.
Introducing the CBN Bible from CBN.com. Now, an easier way to study the Bible and grow in your faith. Highlight your favorite verse. Read separate versions at a glance. Click and read a commentary. Or cross-reference your favorite verse using the Strong's Concordance. All the right tools to study the Bible, all in one place. The CBN Bible, available at cbn.com/Bible or the iTunes App Store.